Hello, and welcome to Kick Conflict to the Curb, the place where leaders and growth minded individuals come to gain the wisdom from the world's best experts in conflict resolution. I'm your host, Joyce Weiss, and I work with leaders who want to create a culture where individuals feel heard and not invisible, driving more engagement, intention, and retention. And I have a question for you. Are you tired of your team saying no news is good news? And you want to figure out how to take this statement and challenge them? Well, I'm excited. Did you hear me? I'm excited to learn from our guest today, who's a powerhouse in supporting teams in learning and growing to be the best selves. So I'd like to introduce our guest. Julia Keider is the Director of Employee Development at Baker College. She is also a coach and consultant who wears many hats in the worlds of learning, personal development, and human resources. Julia is a wife, mother, daughter, sister, and active member of her Livingston County community. She believes that everyone can learn and grow into their best selves. She lives in Howell, Michigan with her husband of over 30 years, and they have 2 young adult sons. Julia is a DISC certified partner in the areas of workplace, leadership, and conflict. Welcome to Kick Conflict to the Curb, Julia. Hello, Julia. Welcome.
What a fantastic introduction. It's such a pleasure to be joining you, Joyce. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Well, I'm a truth teller and I only tell the truth. So what was in that introduction? Well,
yeah.
I'm excited because we had a chance to speak in the blue and red room, not the green room here. And we talked about some really powerful things that I know our viewers are going to enjoy. So let's get right into it. What are some strategies that you use to support leaders in managing, resolving, and even engaging in productive conflict?
Yeah. 3 parts to that question, quite honestly. I think the first strategy, particularly as a coach, is really helping leaders, whether they're in the first part of their leadership role or a well-seasoned leader in their current position, is to be able to self-assess. Mm-hmm. And sometimes that can mean using research-based assessments like Hogan or DISC or any type of research-based assessment that allows them to really self-reflect. And it is with the intention that they have the mindset to be self-reflective, right? Mm-hmm. A lot of those assessments can be very confirming and affirming of what they already believe about themselves, but there should be some opportunities for eye-opening and revealing some things about themselves that they did not know. And maybe sometimes they didn't necessarily like about themselves. So I think that's the first and foremost, is really helping leaders understand how self-assessments can really support not only their understanding of themselves currently, but the areas that they can continue to grow. And so when you mentioned the second portion, and that was about conflict management, right? Mm-hmm. The second part of the question is really within those assessments, really understand what they come to the table with in terms of their own natural ways of viewing conflict. So if I can refer to the DISC model, the D in DISC is dominance, and how those individuals deal with conflict. Guess what? It's both feet in. And there's really not a whole lot of reservation to conflict. It needs to be addressed and it needs to be fixed so we can focus on results. And so that's how that style of personality tends to approach conflict. So if I am an influencer, I am probably not going to be using the same strategies by nature, because my focus is really on making sure that people like me. And so I may use other strategies that are more approaching the other, let alone myself, right? And so just really understanding where those assessments can really offer you the opportunity to be aware of what you're bringing to the table. And when we talk about conflict management, then when you know what you bring to the table and what the other brings to the table, you can really kind of mediate and negotiate and pay more attention to not only yourself, but also the others. Okay, and then the last part of your question was about productive conflict, right? And I know we'll get deeper into that, really, right? You and I had talked earlier about this gap, this space between the stimuli or the space, right, that we're in, and what conflict we interpret happening and how we actually respond to it. You called it the gap. I've heard some people call it the freedom to choose, right? Or the conscious space in between there, and how we slow that down, again, to go back into our management tools, and again, to kind of go further back into who we are as individuals. All those three pieces come together, and sometimes it's a split second that you have to decide. But when working with leaders, right, evolving into that and finding the value of those three pieces coming together makes an outstanding leader.
It does. And just to reiterate what you just said, Julia, in my words, is that you're right. I call it the gap. And I don't care whether you're a real strong, dominant leader, an interactor, a steady or careful. These are all from the DISC, different behavioral styles. We all need to step into the gap. Somebody pushes you, you're going to respond. If you don't have that time to get into the gap, how many times, viewers, have you said to yourself after you responded, oh my gosh, why did I say that? Well, I've done that too. So thank you very much for bringing that up, Julia, because that gap between the stimulus and the response is really one of the power strategies that I use in the WISE communication success plan. So we can call it different things, but it's the same thing. And I said in the introduction, how many leaders here are sick and tired of hearing no news is good news? So could you speak to that phrase and how you challenge people to manage conflict when they believe in that?
I mean, first and foremost, putting my human resources hat on, you know, as the director of employee development, working with employee relations issues and making sure there's levels of employee engagement, right? And that we're promoting individuals. When we talk about no news is good news, it's very quiet. And sometimes people are, when it gets quiet, I get nervous, right? Because I'm not hearing anything. And that doesn't always mean, the calm before the storm, essentially. And really to challenge that a little bit and not to create conflict or create noise, but let's create conversations. And sometimes we learn things from individuals that we don't hear from a lot. But when we give them that voice and we give them the space to at least articulate their loves, their lows, the things that challenge them on the day-to-day, that information is so key and so helpful. So when I hear people say, I'm not hearing any complaints, I'm a little cautious sometimes because maybe it's not complaints. Maybe the voices haven't gotten loud enough for you to hear, but what are the whispers? What are the things that are maybe balancing out like a struggle that it hasn't exploded, or maybe even some really good things that are happening that we should equally pay attention to? Like, how do we get the voices in the room?
And you're right. It doesn't mean necessarily that it's bad news if you don't hear. How about people who maybe they shared some positive things going on in their team, but their leader ignored them or they put them down? Well, they're not going to say good things about their team anymore if they get that slap in the face. And especially, if they were honest and you have a leader says, oh, come on, I want open communication. You share your thoughts. And again, if you get put down again, there's going to be silence. It's almost like when I watch TV and I hear the actors say, is everything okay? That drives me crazy, Julia, because everyone always said, oh, sure, everything's fine, when you just saw a scene right before where it wasn't okay. So,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
yeah. So let's stop here for a moment to take a break. We're going to come right back, folks. Don't go away. You're watching Kick Conflict to the Curb, and Julia and I are going to come back and talk about what to do when your staff is understaffed. Stay tuned. Are your star employees leaving? Does your team speak up and admit mistakes without the fear of risk or humiliation? Hi, I'm Joyce Weiss, communication coach and queen of conflict resolution. Department managers discover how to create a workplace where every voice matters. Learn to encourage team members to speak up, admit mistakes, and contribute confidently without fear. Dive into strategies for managing healthy conflict, fostering an environment of respect and recognition, and valuing each employee's expertise. Transform your workplace into a space where everyone feels seen, heard, and seriously considered. Well, welcome back to Kick Conflict to the Curb. And I have Julia Keider right here. Let's continue this engaging conversation. So, thin and understaffed teams are playing all hands on deck, Julia. The lines are blurred between team and individual expectations. I'm hearing this from so many of my leaders. Please tell us how you see this in today's workplace.
Well, I'm a huge proponent of making sure that you have the right people in the right seats doing the roles that give them a healthy challenge to their strengths, but actually promote their strengths even more. So when we have thin teams, everybody's stressed. So I think that there are a few things that leaders can do. Number one is to be more open to listen to those team members, right? You're going to hear a lot of frustration. And the idea is not to solve the frustrations or just to say poo-poo, it's going to go away or it'll get better. Again, quiet thyself sort of thing. It's really to use more inquiry into questioning and helping the other person, the person with the frustration, kind of utilize some internal strategies to help them understand themselves, right? So we can ask some clarifying questions. When somebody says, oh, this is so frustrating, well, what specifically about this is most frustrating to you? Well, when I do this process or I use this software, I consistently get kicked out. Okay, so the software itself we're recognizing isn't necessarily, it's actually hindering our work, Show me exactly what this is. And again, the idea is not to problem solve, but sometimes in that side-by-side conversation, like I'm your partner, I'm your cheerleader, I'm your supporter, can really help the other person build a sense of self-efficacy and confidence to be able to tackle some of those challenges on their own. Now, rightfully so, I think leaders also have a responsibility to remove roadblocks, right, where it's available. So rather than say, you deal with it yourself, that's your job, that's what I pay you to do, it's more along the lines of, if I in a leadership position know certain things or have leverage with certain individuals at the executive level, why wouldn't I leverage that to be able to support my team? So there's oftentimes this allegiance to support the higher level, process. I don't want to rock the boat with the president, so to speak. But there also is an allegiance and a dedication to the team and recognizing when the team is stretched. So I'll kind of push that a little bit more when you talked about the individual. Having individual one-on-ones is key. Whether you do them once a week, every couple of weeks, I don't like to go any further than that, because then the agenda gets so heavy with things that have accumulated after 4 to 6 weeks. And there really isn't time to build a sustainable cadence in those conversations. So at Baker College, we have an online platform that it can allow for that continuous engagement, those continuous check-ins, but very easily, having literally a standing 15 to 20 minute meeting, whether it's before lunch, after lunch, wrapping up the day, whatever it may be that's convenient for both parties, is really a check-in. How are you feeling about this work? What are the areas that you felt most drained, right? And what ends up happening is the employee or the team member starts to feel like, well, I keep having these conversations. I start having these conversations with myself, right? So that builds that internal dialogue. So having those regular check-ins can mitigate some of the anxiety that happens when teams are a little bit more stretched or thin.
Oh, what a great answer. And leaders, I've got one easy solution to this. Do everything that Julia is suggesting. Change it around to fit your style. And most important, listen, don't tell. The whole point of everything, if I had to put a big umbrella on what you just said, Julia, and I'm finding that the individuals who come to my facilitation and we talk about the leaders and what they need from leaders, so many times is I just want to be heard. Don't fix it. That's if you get nothing else from today's interview, listen to Joyce and Julia, the two J's, and listen, don't tell, don't fix, and you're going to thank us for that. So
I do hear a lot, Joyce, in coaching conversations. And I told them this, I told them this. And after the third, I told them, I actually paraphrase and say, you told them a lot of things. What was the engagement that you were having an actual conversation in this? Because that doesn't sound like a conversation. That sounds like a delegation or I'm telling you this. And it really does pause because you ask, well, what was I really expecting from that conversation? What level of engagement? But when you turn it and make it more balanced or even turn it back on the other person, you kind of force yourself to listen.
yes, and that could be a huge blind spot. And that's why all of these assessments that you mentioned before help not just with the individual employees, but leaders. Besides a self-reflection, how about learning? Really, is that me? Am I a teller? Sometimes people really don't know, and that's why they're so powerful. Well, teams need to understand their own evolution when they bring in new members or when their focus changes through organizational restructuring. This is going on today more and more, Julia. What do you have to say about that, please?
Well, last week's change in leadership, the upcoming changes in leadership is a prime example of how we can still pivot and how we can still mold ourselves to kind of go with the punches, roll with the punches and be part of that change. So when you and I had talked earlier, when you know that change is coming, which is the most ideal, there's always those unexpected changes. But when you know it's coming, how are you preparing the team? So let me just distill this down to a team of 6 individuals and you are ready to hire somebody else, right? You're filling a gap. No one has left, but now the team is expanded, right? The work has gotten so much so that we need to expand this. How are you preparing the space for this particular role? How are you preparing the team, right? What conversations are you having? Maybe this person is going to be doing a little bit of everything. Maybe they're going to be targeting. The team should know this. The team should be prepared for what that role is and making space for it. And then there's that person that comes in, right? And we call this, an onboarding plan. How are we now re-engaging the team? Because really the culture of the team changes when you add one, subtract one, add 4, right? Bring in another team, right? It all changes. It all continues to morph. And so when you raise your level of consciousness to say, not to reset necessarily, but to integrate, to be more inclusive of what the strengths of those new team members, maybe where the gaps are that we might need to fill when we have an absence of a team member that's been with us for 30 years. All of those things do take deliberate planning and consciousness, and the team should be involved in that, right? Everybody's voice should be at least given the chance to be heard and to re-engage with those new team members coming on board.
And your answer is spot on is involvement of the team. And I've had some guests who say they involve the new people too, right at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
So that the team, meaning the new people, the experienced people, get to know each other, and they don't just stand out like a sore thumb.
Yeah.
So what you're saying is so important, and it's not happening as often as it should. Otherwise, why is it, Julia, that you and I and all the other coaches out there are hearing, and they're not complaints because employees have nothing else to do. They're frustrated. They're frustrated that their leaders aren't making this transition as smoothly as possible. So this is huge. We've covered so many challenges. I have to ask you, will you return, please?
I would love to. I think that there are so many areas of our,
Good.
our overlapping work that we can certainly have more conversations about, and we're just scratching the surface.
Absolutely. And what I would like you to do is I'm going to put your LinkedIn address there and your website.
Mm-hmm.
Tell people, would you like them to connect with you on LinkedIn or send you questions? Please answer and let people know how to reach you.
Yeah, absolutely. LinkedIn's probably the best way for that. And, using the chat feature, I have some really good friends that I've met over LinkedIn, colleagues, and that they have become friends. So that is the best space. And I love expanding my network just to be able to, number one, learn from other people.
Yes.
And then to be able to share some of the knowledge and insights and some of the great things happening in leadership and at work, right? I like to highlight those great, wonderful areas that we are doing it. We are kicking it out of the park. And so LinkedIn is the best way. And then there are some additional coaching tips on my website on KeiderConsulting.com. These are communications that I've sent out over the years to be able to say, hey, there are some strategies, some models. We talked about DISC just as one of them, and productive conflict, but a whole host of other areas to kind of explore and poke around. So thank you for that opportunity, Joyce.
Oh, absolutely. I'm going to go there right away, by the way. And yeah, I've already commented on a couple of your posts, and we're new connections on some of the great things that you're doing at work. So thank you so much, Julia Keider. It was a pleasure. Come back.
My pleasure as well. Thank you so much, Joyce.
Absolutely. So I sure hope that you enjoyed yourself learning from Julia as much as I did. And please take her up on reaching out to her. She's going to answer questions and she's going to respond to you. And it's fun to be connected on LinkedIn also. So if you want to discuss how I can work with you as a communication coach or facilitator, all you have to do is send me an email. Going to make it easy, joyce@joyceweiss.com, so we can go kick conflict to the curb together. And I want to thank all of you for watching, especially the people who come back every couple weeks when we have a new guest. And this is Joyce Weiss, and I end up the show the same way all the time. You get what you tolerate. Is it going to be chaos or calm? Thanks for watching, and thanks to Julia Keider for being a stellar guest.